Hello. Hello, I'm Rachel Gerber, the denominational minister for youth and young adults for Mennonite Church USA, and also the editor of The Gathering Place, which is an interactive website for Anabaptist youth leaders to learn, be, and connect. And you can find the Gathering Place community at www.thegatheringplace.us. Well, every month here at The Gathering Place, we focus on a different theme. And this theme for the month of October is all about reimagining mentoring. I think it's pretty safe to say that we all agree that having intentional relationships with our youth and significant adults in their lives are a good thing in creating durable faith. But the question is oftentimes it feels forced and it's hard to get people on board, both youth and adults, to commit to such a relationship over a long, extended period of time. So what gives? What are we going to do? And that's what we're going to talk about today. What are some new models of engaging as we think about mentoring and discipling? And today I am thrilled to have Michele Her, who is Bible and Religion professor at Heston College. And she's here with us along with her class, Exploring Ministry, and we're thrilled to have Michele talk with us today about what are some new models to think about as we approach this mentoring conundrum. So welcome, Michele, to The Gathering Place for this hour, and we're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Rachel. And just let me say from the beginning, I'm honored to be here. And if I talk too fast, text Rachel, or if I'm cutting out, and I'll slow down or repeat or do whatever we need to do. But I'm glad to be here this morning. I'm going to basically do three things. Just a very brief minute or two on a definition of mentoring and why for so many years it's been a very important piece of youth ministry and ministry in general. Talk about just to admit that it's not working, why it's not working, and then I have three takeaways, three alternative solutions that hopefully give the best of what mentoring brings without all the baggage and the problems. Does that sound okay? I guess everybody's muted, so okay, here we go. When I think about mentoring in the very traditional sense, I think about one adult plus one youth on a regular basis being together intentionally to nurture a spiritual friendship. On the surface, doesn't that sound great? And yes, it is great, and research backs it up that it's great. I'm going to go all the way back to 1994. This is a classic for many of us. And those of us who have been in the business for a long time know I could bring up a lot of books. Mark DeVries talks about and did a lot of research about the incredible influence that parents have on youth, that they are the #1 influence, either for good or for bad, on their high schoolers. And then, of course, the book goes on to talk about, and Mark himself would talk about, what happens when those parents cannot be the good influence. And so then we have, with books such as The God-Bearing Life, which I forgot to bring, Candy Creasy Dean, Ron Foster, saying that a guarantor, a caring, nurturing adult who is not a parent, is a great #2, and how important that influence is. And then you get to some later studies. Sticky Faith, I brought well, that doesn't even show on a podcast, a paper. College in Transition, the College Transition Project, Kara Powell, others did that, where they're looking for a silver bullet to help it. We have this incredible problem with 50% of our youth graduating out of church when they graduate out of high school. I'm going to look at my people here, and they're shaking their heads. 50%. They didn't really find a silver bullet, but one of the things that is most helpful is for that youth, that adolescent, to have a 5-to-1 ratio, 5 caring adults for every youth. Wow. We have older research, Emmy Werner. Now, she actually puts it at 6. She says that 90% of the youth who have 6 caring adults tend to stay in church. I mean, I could go on and on with the research. And then, last but not least, Andrew Root's Revisiting Relational Youth Ministry talks about the importance of place sharing. He kind of spins it in a different way, but the importance of mentoring in that. Andrew does a wonderful job of saying what I think for some of us is like, we don't know how to say it because we feel guilty. A youth pastor or a youth worker cannot have deep relationships with all of the youth involved. It's impossible. It's exhausting. Youth pastor has to have boundaries, and yet youth need those relationships. How does that happen? Andrew Root talks about getting other people involved, but he is drawing us away from the whole idea of influencing high schoolers. Note that I made that, and I did that intentionally in my definition, because usually in mentoring, the way we see it, the adult is influencing the youth. He moves that away from influence to solidarity, standing with, suffering with each other. Now, so that would be how I see mentoring, and when we start to talk and chat here, you all can correct me or add to that. But the second layer I want to get to fairly soon is the reality, the honesty, that in many of our congregations, mentoring in the traditional sense is not working. Daniel Yoder wrote a wonderful blog. Daniel, I don't think you're on today, but we're thinking of you. Rachel, you yourself said it seems impossible to do. We know it seems like such a good idea, but for reasons we can't, or maybe we do know, it's just not working. I'm going to stop now because I want this to be more interactive. You all type in. I'm going to have some of my students maybe chime in as to talk about why it might be such a problem. Go. Do you all have any, like, a mentoring relationship that didn't go very well in high school? Yep. You want to come and share it? If it's just real short?
It just didn't work.
Why didn't it work, Micah?
Communication with the lads that weren't used to being in the church life. You were Christian than I was.
He was a newer Christian than you were. Wow.
Yeah. Didn't know about it. Wasn't convinced of the men I think.
Okay.
And has now left the church.
Oh, no.
At least left the men of the church because he didn't agree.
One of my students, Micah Raber, is talking about his disastrous mentoring relationship where he was paired with an adult who is a newer, younger Christian, younger in the sense of being a Christian than Micah, didn't really know what he was doing, actually has now since left the church,
Yeah,
right? And that was a disaster. Anyone else piping in for what you think the problem is?
I see here we have different lifestyles, don't know what to do with the youth. Schedules, finding time to meet, time's the biggest factor, and pairing struggles. And people just aren't responding. Our mentoring program about safe child policies, how do we do with that?
Yeah. Ooh. And some of those, is that resonating with my class too? The time thing, I'm seeing people shake heads with times. Was it a good connection with your adults? I'm seeing some people shake their heads yes, but it takes a lot of work. I would propose that it's deeper than time and deeper than I'm not just sure what I'm doing. I might be wrong, but I think that there's some deeper layers to that. Are you ready for me to go with that? And then you all can respond to that as well, too. I think way down deep that one of the deep problems is that mentoring as we have traditionally done it, that is, you have a little ceremony, in front of the congregation, and it's very official, and it's maybe there's a little bit of training involved. That's what I mean by mentoring. You call it by the M word. All of that feels inauthentic. particularly to the adolescent. I'm going to get my old woman glasses on here. Look at my notes here. Yeah. With authentic relationships being the number one value, they say, for postmodern youth, it feels forced. It's the idea of, oh, you've been kind of pressured by the church to be my friend. And can any true, real relationship be coerced? That's the issue. It also might be that adults are reluctant to say yes to it, and they might say time and busyness and those factors, but it might also be intimidation factor. They don't know how to be. So I think that the second real big problem is many of our adults, I don't know how to say this in a tactful way, need a conversion experience to see high schoolers as individuals who have something beautiful and wonderful to give to them. Adults don't see this relationship as being beneficial to them. And youth sense that as well. It's the conversion from ministry to ministry with. A conversion of adults giving up their power. And I imagine that there are misconceptions on the high schooler side as well, but I want to talk primarily about the adults because it's adults who have the power in the relationship. What does it mean to give up your power so that you are receiving as well as giving? Even squirmy junior hires, even snarky seniors. Does that resonate with folks? And I'm going to look at I'm looking at my students. I'm taking a poll of my students for how many of you've been in a kind of a mentoring relationship that didn't quite feel authentic. Only 50%, so that's really good. Okay. Rachel, any comments coming down the pike?
Not at this point. We have just a few questions that I don't know if you want to address at this point or further on, as how many Mennonite churches actually have formal mentoring programs, as well as what can we learn from churches who have mentored young people but didn't have such formal programs. And maybe we'll get to that second question, but just did most of your students participate in a mentoring program or have churches that offered one?
I think yes. I'm thinking 3/4 of 12. Do the math. Yes. Yeah. Now I'm going to look at, was it formal class or was it more informal? Okay. Like how many of you, it was something that was announced in front of church, or maybe you stood and got someone to pray over you? No?
There was training.
But there was training. Some others? What'd you say, Abraham?
Like praying.
There-
only have like
Okay. But just a praying over the youth. Okay?
we did. I mean, I was the.
You were the youth. Yes, Micah, yes. Yeah, you were the one and only. Okay.
I mentored a lot of students, but it wasn't like the church asked me. Well,
Okay.
I'm a sponsor. And,
Okay.
But I did a lot of mentoring with the students, with
Yeah.
my youth.
Yeah.
Which some of them are still in church.
Yeah.
In their 50s.
You should come here. Are you willing to say this here so I can see you, Gracie? Yeah. Gracie's going to talk about from her perspective. Here we come.
Hello, I'm Gracie. And back home when I was a youth sponsor, I had a lot of youth, but mostly young ladies that kind of, I wasn't their mentor, I was a sponsor, but they kind of got attached to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a lot of time with them talking about girl things and about growing up and in high school. So I'm honored that I'm still friends with them. These young ladies are in their 50s. They have families. And when I go back home, I still meet with them, and we talk, and we still laugh, and we still have a lot of fun remembering how when they were young and how we did things. And there wasn't a praying over me or a praying over the youth. It just like, okay, you're young, you can handle the youth, you're a youth sponsor. And that's how I ended up in that job. And I think that at this age, I still do mentoring, and I love it. I love spending time talking to youth. And one of the things, I guess, it keeps me young. Yeah, it makes me feel young to be able to talk to students. Thank you.
There, an example of something that really worked. To answer that first question, I do not know how many Mennonite churches have official mentoring. Like Bob, do you know, or Kurt? Okay.
She's moving there, but she's from.
No one saying no? Okay. I'm sorry. We could look at it. I don't know if we could Google that. I just don't know. I've heard informally that many congregations struggle to have an official mentoring program. Any other questions or comments? While we're waiting, Colton's going to come and talk about his mentoring experience. We're getting some eyewitnesses here. Yeah.
For myself, it was a guy in our congregation that was my mentor, and we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand, and we're like, hey, do you want to do this? And we decided we did. So we went through training at my church, and I mean, it was simple stuff, but then at the same time, it was like, I don't want to be dealing with this. I would rather just go and do it. But we didn't. I don't really know why. I know in the fall he's a farmer, so he was always busy with harvest in the fall, and but again, that shouldn't have made a huge difference. We just didn't meet up very much. We'd go to the occasional Illini basketball game, but I don't know. And later on, he became my Sunday school teacher, so I saw him every Sunday and had a discussion with him then, but it still wasn't mentoring where I think it should be. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what we would have done differently, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Michelle, it sounds like Bob said that at Indiana-Michigan conference, about 2/3 to 3/4 he guesses do not have a participating program. And then another question that Kurt raised was, why are small groups at church, like the intergenerational groups that are already happening, valued and seem to work, but this isn't a model that is seen for what a mentoring relationship could look like. So I have a sense that that's where you're going to go.
That is where I'm going to go. And you cut out a little bit, but I think I understood that, what's the relationship, or what could be the connection between some of these very intentional small groups that are intergenerational? That's a great question, and we can. I'm gonna slice the problem one more time, and then we can go to some of these solutions. And I don't know. It looked like we were frozen here a little bit. I don't know if you heard Colton's story or not. I don't know. Yeah, you did. Okay. Here's the conundrum, and I thought that Daniel Yoder alluded to this as well. If mentoring is programmed, and by programmed I mean very upfront, very intentional, could include training, all of which I love the training thing. But if it's programmed and official, then you deal with the problem of it feeling inauthentic, and at least possibly. Now, I didn't hear Colton say this, but at least some feelings from the adolescent side that, oh, you've been kind of guilted into meeting with me. Yeah. And the adult maybe is a little bit scared of it because it seems like, oh my, an official role. I haven't been trained in youth ministry. I know how to fish. I'd be glad to fish with Colton, But mentor, wow, that's scary. But on the other hand, if mentoring isn't programmed, my fear is that it isn't going to happen, or that it happens so little that, now you might have Gracie Tijarinas who do it enough. I mean, yours was kind of, so how do you get the intentionality without getting the inauthenticity? That would be what I'm seeking to do. I'm looking at my notes here. And I think underlying all of that, again, is that need for a deep conversion experience. So I'm going to talk about that too. I actually have then 3 ways that I think that we could work at this that fix some of the problems and actually keep some of the benefits of mentoring. Those 3 ways are this: going covert, and I think, Gracie, your story is an illustration of that. And by that I mean we talk to adults about what it means to have a spiritual friendship with youth, but we don't do the big splashy intentional thing. Number 2, what I call missional discipleship initiative groups, something that Marvin Lorenzana created and is supported by Mennonite Mission Network, and I'll go into greater detail in a minute on both of those things. And the third strategy being preaching and teaching for this type of conversion. And I am talking about from the pulpit. I'm talking about it being that, and in that sense being very intentional. Let me go backwards to the covert operation. Maybe you don't even call it mentoring. Maybe it's time for a new word. But you gather some adults together and you really help them to understand the incredible importance of the 5-to-1 ratio. That they can maybe say some things, be some things for high schoolers that their parents can't be. And to talk about that if you're really comfortable fishing or shooting skunks, such as an earlier story, that's your place. That's what you do. Does that make sense? What the whole? I mean, you go about it from a different angle. I'd like to spend quite a bit of time talking about what we're pretty excited about in this class, missional discipleship groups. Marvin Lorenzana came and spoke with us and about these groups, and then each of us, each student has created a triad, a small group of 3 persons, and have formed kind of a mutual relationship with 2 other people that I think in some ways looks like mentoring. MDI groups are this. They are structured in that you meet every week, that the 3 of you commit to a certain amount of scripture that you read beforehand, and that you go through 5 questions when you meet once an hour. In that way, it is programmed, it is intentional. It is also very flexible in that you're only dealing with 3 people, so it could be meeting at 10 o'clock at night, or 7 a.m., or some other crazy time, because there are only 3 of you. It's flexible in that you can decide what scripture it is you want, or what input you want to do. And different groups need different things. It's flexible in that sometimes you don't get through all the 5 questions, and you do what the 3 of you need to do. And I think it is a more mutual relationship than mentoring. That's the MDI groups. The other thing that I really like about it,
Michele,
and Andrew Root, when he talks, yes.
I was just going to jump in and say, you mentioned there's 5 questions. Can you tell us what those 5 questions are?
I think I can. Does anybody have Gracie's going to read them for us. I didn't bring that card. It's awful. I know one it is what did you, thank you, here it is. Where have you seen God at work this week? You know, I've done a triad for 6 months now. You'd think I'd have these memorized. But I don't want to say them exactly. What did you hear God say to you this week during your prayer time? What have you learned from the assigned scripture reading this week? How have you shared the love of Jesus with others this week? And where have you fallen short this week? They are great questions. I'm in a triad with 2 other women, and one of them would not see herself in a community of believers. We have marvelous times. You can get all you would have to do is to go to Mennonite Mission Network's website, call or email Marvin Lorenzana, and he would be glad to help give you further input on that. Let me take some other questions about MDI groups, and then we're going to get some testimonies. And I'm telling my students they can tell the negative stuff too. One of the really important things about MDI groups is this. It is missional. And I like that I heard Andrew Root in this book of his talk about missional relationships also. It's missional in the sense that after a year or 18 months, this triad intentionally splits and then forms at least 2 other triads so that more people can come in the circle. With the mutuality, with the nurturing, with the discipleship that happens between the 3 people, it can be other adults besides the youth pastor and besides the parent who are working together with the adolescents, doing ministry with, but developing these deep spiritual friendships. Your comments or questions from out there?
I'll just read here from Ashley. She said, when I was the youth in a program, we would meet as a broad mentoring group once a month. Then we were responsible for meeting together alone once a month by ourselves. For us, I would just go shopping or get ice cream. There was no pressure to talk about God, but sometimes it came up, and she felt like that program worked for them. Also, the mentees were given opportunities to choose a mentor, writing down a few people in their church that they valued. Not that they were numbered, but then the leaders of the mentoring program contacted us together before. This way the youth felt more involved, that the mentors felt honored to already have a relationship, and that they deepened that relationship.
Yeah. Ashley, that sounds really good.
That's how it was in my church.
Cassidy's saying that's how it was in her church. And that felt good to you, Cassidy?
Definitely.
Yeah. Wow. But I've also heard that for others, you know, they choose 3 adults, and all 3 adults, they feel kind of guilty, but they say no. I mean, has that been anybody's experience? Yeah, yeah. Part of it, I have been a mentor, and I've said, yep, we're meeting once a month, and I'm just going to be honest. And I love youth ministry, right? And I'd forget. And then it became once every 4 months. And that was actually the experience of my 3 children. The mentoring that they had, it didn't happen very much. But that maybe it could just be us too. Any other questions? And I maybe might have some couple testimonials about MDI triads.
There's nothing over here on our link, so I'd love to hear the testimonials about how it's going.
Yeah, let's hear a couple testimonials. Good, bad, how it's going. Abraham's coming up? Yep, Abraham's coming up. Yeah, just go talk right there, baby.
Hey, good morning. I'm Abraham Mateo. My triad group, we get together every once a week for an hour, and that is on Saturdays around 9 o'clock. When we start our triad, we usually just open up with a prayer, and then we begin to read the chapter. And then as we're reading the chapter, I'll be the first one to read out loud, and then I'll have them reread the chapter to themselves, and then we'll start talking about what did they feel like God was talking to them through that scripture, and then we'll just from there we just open up and we'll just get into like deep conversations of what they understood about the chapter we read, and then after that I go over the group with the 5 questions. But yeah, so far it's been really well. I can tell that they have a hunger for the word, because they always come back and ask me, hey, can it be more than an hour? Can it be just I don't know. They're just really hungry for the word, and I can see that each week they are growing, because they're starting to realize how much they are far from God and how much they want to get closer with God. I guess that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Abraham. Anybody else? Yeah, let's Emma. Come on up, Emma. These are some of the MDIs are intergenerational, and some are not. I think Emma's would represent one that's not.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Hi. So my triad, we meet every Sunday, and I have there's a girl who is a Christian, and then I have the other girl. She is from Japan, and she's a Buddhist, which has been a really interesting way to get sort of a different perspective on the scripture reading that we're doing. We're reading through Mark, and it's really kind of difficult almost for me to connect with the Buddhist girl in my group, just because she naturally doesn't talk very much in these kinds of situations, and so it's been a bit of a struggle to get that going, but at the same time I am starting to see ways that she's beginning to open up and engage in what we're talking about, and she does read the scriptures, which is, I think, fantastic, and I love her questions about it. And but yeah, it's just
It's kind of wild, isn't it?
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
That's
Thank
fun.
you.
Yep.
Maybe I'll do one. Colton, yours is intergenerational. While he's coming up, we talk about the difference between, and maybe this is just slicing words, multi-generational. The generations are together, but the goal being truly intergenerational, where there really is a real intentionality about listening to each other across the generations. Here's Colton.
My group is myself, another college student, baseball player, and a guy that's in his mid-70s. So there's a little bit of a difference there. For us, it's not so much talking that's an issue. We have good conversation when we meet. It really is trying to find a time that works between schoolwork. The guy has baseball, has practices and games and stuff, and he's busy a lot, as well as his homework. And the older guy, that he's very involved in the church. He's the chair of the elders, he also has a lot of responsibilities. So having a time on a day that specifically works doesn't necessarily work for us. So it's usually across 3 days, either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. But it is one of those 3. And we meet together, we talk about the 5 questions, and then we dive into the scripture, and where we've been looking at James, and that's been really good. So I guess what I've enjoyed about it is the fact that we've had that different perspective, very different life experiences between the 3 of us, and that's something that I've enjoyed, and look forward to continue having. Thank you.
Colton, as you're walking right, I'm going to ask Colton, is it mutual?
I think so.
It is. I think so. Okay. All right.
It was a very fantastic time.
Yeah.
Hey, Michelle, there's a comment here and a question about, does anyone just do mentoring around the exploration of baptism? Or how does that functioning kind of relationship happen in that?
I actually do quite a few workshops, seminars and things on baptism connected to the book God's Story, Our Story, and I know that a lot of people do that, and I think it's really, really important. I just would hate to see it be the only time, and unless that starts a 4 or 5 year relationship, and that might be one of the times, because of the intentionality of the baptism itself, that the programming of the mentoring relationship doesn't feel inauthentic. And I actually get more positive. I hear more positive things about that type of mentoring than I do. They're in junior high now. We're going to set them up, 1 adult, 1 youth. Here we go. But you know, Ashley's got some things that are working. So, I mean, I think in some places it does work. I also hear though that sometimes it doesn't. Oh, I think in any kind of a catechism process, it's just very, very important to have more than 1 adult, more than the youth pastor or pastor, walking alongside the new believers. Other comments or questions?
I have a question. I don't see anything coming up the pike right now from the others, but my question is how do you, I hate to use the word convince, but I will use it. How do you convince adults in your congregations to, like you said before, like release their power or see that they it's a mutuality, something that they are also able to offer? How does that actually happen to gain momentum and steam, and for people to understand the mutuality and the gain that this happens, that this can produce?
Yeah. I think it's impossible I do see it as a conversion experience. And we can't transform other people. We can't convert them. We can only maybe, in a sense, prepare ourselves and prepare our church. We can maybe get up to the doorsteps of a new conversion, but that's the Spirit's work. And part of this comes off my dear love of biblical hospitality, which I think connects here as well. I think one of the reasons that mentoring sometimes doesn't work is because adult thinks, oh, okay, I'm the big guy here. I've got to teach this youth something. And there's an element of truth in that. But it feels like a power play. It's the strategy of influence, which is not, I think, true incarnation. It's us loving to wash other people's feet, but kind of hating it when people wash our feet. So I think you talk very directly about this conversion, this attitude change. And this, if we could really get each other to truly give up some of our power, so that high schoolers who help lead worship on Sunday morning aren't just tokens, or the youth who are on committees aren't just tokens, or the youth in a mentoring relationship aren't just tokens, but feel that they're who they are is really valued. I think it changes everything. So you preach from the pulpit. You preach about the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman. And Jesus wasn't just manipulating that situation. He really wasn't thirsty, but it was a way to kind of snag her. No. The disciples had the water bucket. He needed to drink. It's noon. He needed her help, and he validated her. And we all know that story from John 4. But the gift of receiving from the other is huge. Another wonderful story is Jesus and Mary and Martha. Jesus needed somebody who would listen to him. He needed to give. And Mary got it, and Martha didn't. The mutual submission, the revolutionary subordination in Paul's epistles, that stuff is huge. So you preach it. And I think more youth pastors like me need to tell our stories of when we didn't get this, and it was all about us. I remember the day at Wichita 95 that things were going really badly on drama team, and I was in tears, and one of my high schoolers came to me, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I lied to her. I said, "Oh, I have allergies," because I didn't want her to know that I was crying and falling apart. She's really smart. And thank goodness she stuck with me. She looked me right in the eye and she said, "Michele, can I pray for you?" I could about cry. Oh my goodness. And that is the day that my youth ministry got turned on its head. And every once in a while I still need that conversion experience. The old Michele still pops up. But that was a day that a 15-year-old was Jesus to me. That does not mean that there are not days where it's really difficult. And that's where, and I'd have everybody read the book Revisiting Relational Youth Ministry by Andrew Root, because he talks about sometimes we don't just suffer on behalf of the youth, we suffer maybe sometimes because of the youth. Sometimes they are hard to be with. Sometimes we're hard to be with. But if it's not about me giving my wisdom to you, if that changes, if that conversion experience happens, then there is a whole new place for true relationship to begin. I would hate to ask my students if I teach differently. I don't know. They probably feel coerced to say yes. I can teach in such a way that I'm the only one who's got knowledge, or I can teach in such a way to realize that each of my 12 students in this classroom have something to offer me, a unique picture of Jesus. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I think it makes great sense. I think that this mutuality and just being in relationship with someone, I like to call it like a constellation sort of approach, where if the youth is in the middle and there's, like a constellation, there's all these connections that are happening and things are feeding in and out each way. The youth are giving, but they're also receiving, and I think the more that we can continue to allow these intergenerational experiences and teach and invite our adults to see that they also have much to gain from these relationships. We're on the right track. Question from Lisa here. she's particularly interested in authentic intergenerational connection in the congregation, even just beyond the mentoring relationships. Do you have any additional thoughts about that? Or even how to expand the triad concept beyond just the mentoring?
Right. Although, and not that I'm, I hope it's not just the fad of the year. I really am pretty excited about the triads. I even think the number 3 changes the dynamic instead of just one-on-one. Marvin's original vision for the triad was that there be a, and this might sound paternalistic and weird, but there's also some sense to it. A Christian who's been a Christian for a very long time, maybe someone who's not been a Christian for, and I hate to make this in like chronological years, but just years of walking with Jesus, someone who's not walked with Jesus for quite as long of a time, and then the third person being someone brand new to the faith or someone still who hasn't decided. And that's the triad. But so the variation in youth ministry, when I think about it as one variation to take the place of mentoring, I think about that high schooler being either that second or that third person, depending on how long they've walked with Jesus. But again, there's that mutuality as it's supposed to be discipling each other. But Lisa, some other ways that you do that, and I think this has to go with, you have to be doing the conversion thing along with it. But you just, when you have a women's supper club thing, that you just very intentionally make it warm and welcoming for younger women. That you form a motorcycle club at church. My husband would love this, and it's for everybody who can be old enough to have a motorcycle driver's license. That there's just some thinking on the part of, there's just some real intentionality about mixing the generations. You all go on a weekend retreat, and the scavenger hunt is to find one person who's 10 years of age different from you and do blah, 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 blah. And then through the course of that retreat, then the pastor gives a clear vision that the two of you continue these conversations for 6 months. You do this weekend retreat, and once every 2 hours somebody rings a bell, and you find that same person who's either 10 years younger or 10 years older, and make it even fun and say the same birthday month. I mean, you can do all sorts of fun things. And you get together and you share. You can do potlucks in such a way, round tables work better than long tables, where there are these questions. Share about how you celebrated birthdays. All that little things that create bridges across the generation is good. Yeah. I don't know if that helps enough, Lisa.
I see where, Michelle, we're down to about 5 minutes. Is there any sort of way that you would like to have any last-minute comments, or feel free for anybody also who's online, if you want to ask an audio question, to unmute yourself too.
I won't talk much more, just to say that some kind of relationship that is real and authentic between adults and adolescents is not just important, it's crucial. It just has to be. It's so important. Better to have even 5 of those relationships, but starting realistically, there needs to be 1 or 2. And whatever way you can find to do it, do it. So yeah, let's open it up for others to make comments. And that can include you all as well, if you want.
Clayton, do you want to talk about what you just wrote about intergenerational can't be programmed?
Yes, I think I can. Yeah, so just in some of the conversations I've been having with a variety of people around this, including Michelle, which is interesting, just talking about how the intergenerational piece really can't be programmed. It's not a solution that in some people's language would be a technical solution, like if I just do this, it'll be solved. It's an adaptive problem. It's something that involves creativity. It involves engaging other voices and being willing to try and experiment things. But I really like this idea that it involves a conversion experience as well. And so my big question is, where can we start from biblically? What are some helpful ways that, if we're going to preach and teach on this and want to remain faithful to our biblical heritage, how do we pick up on this? How do we not proof text, but engage Scripture as part of this? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. Besides those, how many stories? When Jesus asked Peter, sinful Peter, Luke chapter 5, to keep that boat close to the shore, which quite frankly is hard work. I don't think it's proof texting. Kenneth Bailey, I think, as a scholar, would agree. He's done some research on this passage. Jesus is asking for help. Jesus understood in a way that I think is true. I think Jesus really did need help. Just like I think Jesus really was thirsty with the Samaritan woman. Just like, things just opened wide up in the road to Emmaus once they invited Jesus in. Jesus could have fed the 5,000 just by probably snapping his fingers, and he used some fairly inept, only mediocrely faithful people, the disciples. And I imagine the first piece of bread that Peter and the boys passed out to that crowd of 5,000 was a little bitty crumb, because that'd be the kind of faith I'd have. So I think those texts are there. So you maybe couldn't do a 10-week series on it, but you can do a 3-week series on it. And the other thing that we've done, and Clayton, you know this from our church, is the young adults and youth who have been involved in our triads are the people who have put their stories in our newsletter saying, this is what triad has done for me. And it's been really good.
Well, thank you so much, Clayton. Great question. And Michelle, I really appreciate you and your class joining us today, talking about this mentoring conundrum and how, like you said, what does it mean to still be intentional? We have to be intentional in creating space for this to happen, because like it or not, the reality is if we don't have some element of intentionality, it most likely will not just happen organically. However, how do we still not get that inauthenticity? And I think this natural, organic happening of intergenerational commingling is one way to do it. And it's like Clayton said, it takes creativity, it takes working together, and it is also very contextual. As much as I would love to come out of this gathering place month and being like, bam, here's your new something to follow, like that's just not the answer. That's not how it's going to work. It's a lot of hard work of working together with those people that really care in your congregations to talk about how do we create a congregation where everyone has voice and we really know each other and are known by one another. So thank you so much, Michelle. Go ahead.
Yep. And just to say, I'm sorry, 20 years ago, this podcast would have been, here are the 6 things you do to start a mentoring program. But you're right about content. You can't do formulas anymore. And yet there does need to be structure. So, yeah. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and blessings to each of you in your ministries.
You're so welcome. And I just also want to say, hey, while I have everyone's ear, Youth Ministry Council, the Gathering 2016, registration is open. So it's lovely seeing everyone here face to face, but we can actually be person to person, and that happens at the end of January 29th to February 1st, Friday through Monday in Orlando, Florida. And we are going to talk about this kind of stuff. What are the big issues that we're dealing with in our day-to-day youth ministry, faith formation world, and using case studies to talk about where God is and how do we move forward even in the midst. So all of you are welcome to come spread the word, and I will post those links as well for the registration with this podcast. So grateful for you all, and many blessings on as you continue to reimagine what mentoring looks like in your context. So take care, and we'll see you later. See you next month.
See ya.
Bye.